Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Tern Talks, the Tern Mentoring Podcast. I'm Tina Fox, the founder and CEO of Tern Mentoring. Today, we have a very special guest, Patty Alper, who is with Teach to Work. Patty Alper and I actually were introduced through a mutual friend, Kim Churches. She's the president of the Washington Center. It's a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. This is after seeing Kim on stage at the American Association of Colleges and Universities. She had a magnanimous talk, and then when I connected with her and we started talking about mentorship, particularly mentorship in the post-secondary space, that being universities and colleges, she said, man, you've got to talk to Patty Alper. And the second that I had a chance to chat with Patty, we were from the same space as far as how we think about mentorship and where we'd like to see this world move forward in mentorship. So today I'm bringing Patty here because our episode today is called Mentorship for All, Different Paths, Same Purpose. And there are many different ways in which people can approach mentorship, certainly organic, but there are also ways in which it can be supported through third parties like Teach to Work or Tern Mentoring. So Patty, welcome to Tern. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Tina, my favorite kindred spirit in this mentorship space. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks for hosting.
That's wonderful. Well, today we're going to get into the deep dive of mentorship. I mean, you and I could talk about this forever, but we're gonna highlight some things. So, everybody has their definition of mentorship, and you've been around a long time. How would you define mentorship?
Well, I'll tell you what mentorship is not. It is not paid. It is not something that you do for money. It is sort of globally, a definition would be to share your knowledge, to be a support, to be a coach. What I often tell my mentees, as a matter of fact, I am not your parent. I have no authority. I'm not your teacher. I'm not grading you. I'm not your boss. I'm not paying you. I'm here because I want to be here and because I have knowledge to share, and hopefully your mentee wants your information. But in my work, particularly also in my book, which I'm sure we'll get to, I have defined a new form of mentoring, which I call project-based mentoring. And that is unique because it's not ambiguous. I love the fact, and I have written this because I have mentored for about 23 years. I've written this as a personal mentor from an entrepreneurial space. This is very skills-based. And I guess my best quick example would be if you put a football or a golf club in between two men, all of a sudden they have a conversation point. They're throwing their football and they're or taking a hike together, right? All of a sudden there's something of common interest between two very different kinds of people potentially, but there's a common interest, and that is to get something done, to be collaborators. And in my definition, there is a leader in this, and there is a subordinate. And in project-based mentoring, I have the mentee be the leader of the project. And the mentor is the subordinated role to lend practicality, to lend information, and to help to build an actual plan to get something done.
I love that. I love how you flip the script, because so often people think of mentorship where the mentor has a higher role and the mentee has a more diminished role. And that's not the way that it is with Teach to Work. The script is actually flipped in that. And your comments on, I'm not your parent, I'm not your professor, I'm not your boss. That's actually a relief, I think, to most mentees, is that, hey, this person is in it for me, as opposed to being in it because there needs to be some payout or something that needs to happen at the end, other than information to be exchanged. So you mentioned your book Teach to Work, but what inspired you? Because you actually had, a career prior to this decision of yours to write a book, to build out your nonprofit of Teach to Work, and this whole concept of project-based mentorship. So what gap were you trying to fill? What were you thinking when you decided, hey, I'm going to create Teach to Work? What were you seeing that wasn't happening?
Well, first of all, I have to mention Nifty. I sit on the board of Nifty. I'm actually a co-chair now of the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. I had an entrepreneurial background. I actually was one of the first women in the Washington, D.C. market to be in the field of construction, believe it or
Love
not.
that. Love that.
Believe it or not. And so we formed a foundation, and at the time I had a radio show, and I interviewed a young lady. I'll never forget her. Her name was Janelle Stubbs. She was 14 years old, and she was a student of Nifty. And this young gal lived on Capitol Hill, and she made stained glass windows for a living. She had $4,000 in mutual funds. She's 14. She had different windows for the Christmas time, for Easter time, for Mother's Day, and she repackaged them and repriced them based on holidays. And I kind of looked at her with skepticism on air. And I said, okay, Janelle, like this all sounds really good, but how do you accomplish this? I want to get into the logistics and the details. And she described for me her plan, which I happen to believe strongly in the importance of a plan. If you're going somewhere in life, you need to know how to get there. You need to map out a plan. And that's what Nifty taught. And it resonated for me because that's always what had worked for me, a plan. So this young lady had a sales team. She had a goal. She wanted to open a Michaels type design craft store in her future. So she was saving for that. And she made her windows after she did her homework to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Her sales team went out Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So she had a plan, and she had goals with how much she was selling. So I got very involved with Nifty. I loved what they did, and I wanted to see what it would be like. What do they teach the teachers, and what role could a mentor have outside of a teacher?
Mm.
Is there a role for a mentor in a classroom? Can we be adjunct and add value? Like I went through blood, sweat, and tears to build this company. And I thought, geez, maybe the young ladies in the classroom could learn something from how I taught myself a new industry. What can I bring to bear that potentially an educator does not? And so I took copious notes. I was the first guinea pig mentor in this program. I walked into my alma mater, Woodrow Wilson High School, public school in Washington, one of the Nifty classes, and I observed everything. And I carved out a role for me as a mentor, as a business person coming into a classroom. And what I have found missing, long way around to get to your question,
Great story.
what I found missing is mentors need, first of all, to know what their job is, especially professional practitioners. They need to know what their role is, like define it. What's nice about it being project-based is there's a beginning, middle, and an end. And they're contributing based on their skill set and their wheelhouse of knowledge. It's not social and emotional. It's not going to go on forever. So I like to define what it is and what it isn't. And it very much works to have this project at the center and to know whose role is whose.
So you went into this classroom, Janelle inspired you to do this,
Correct.
and you're the very first. So after that experience, what was the next lift that you needed to do? Because obviously you needed to go identify other mentors. How did that work after that initial time that you ended up in the classroom?
So it was a pilot program in the DC market. Nifty is all over the United States, and now it's global. So I started back in maybe 2001.
Mhm.
I went in the class and I wrote a template on what it was to be a mentor. What is our role? How do we court them, mentors, to come to class? How often would they come? And for Nifty, we developed this actually as a fundraising model. There was a fee for a company to adopt a class. And I wrote a book about it. I wrote a template on how to court the mentors. What is the contribution? Does some stipend go to a teacher? And I actually I knew people from the commercial real estate world. I knew tenants who moved into buildings who we built. I mean, I had all kinds of mentors in the commercial space to invite. And I started by inviting them to class with me to speak and introduce themselves. And they said, yeah, I want to do this too. This sounds really fun. So it grew. And what I learned in this whole growth process, which is why I wrote the book, sometimes I don't know what happens to us as we get older, but we want to, at our cocktail parties, we shake hands and say, oh, this is what I do now. And my company has 100 employees, and this doesn't work with youth. It doesn't work with mentees. They honestly don't want to hear how great you are.
Yeah.
So I would end up having to interview people to bring their more humble side out. And that's why I wrote the book and developed a training to help prepare people to be better mentors and to connect. And in that training, it includes, and I say this, I only know this from listening closely to the questions of the mentees. They want to know, how did you know you could do this?
Mhm.
Weren't you afraid? How did you overcome that obstacle? They want to know the sort of beginnings of you going into this field and how you got there. And